Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we are going to talk about the new Magic the Gathering Warhammer 40K Commander decks, which is the Warhammer 40K Magic the Gathering collective set of cards. Okay, and specifically, what I want to talk about today is just the complexity of this and what's happening with it, and also specifically call out that Professor Dungeon Master over on Dungeon Craft, in the video below, linked below, he says that that Wizards of the Coast. He's talking about Wizards of the Coast down third quarter, right? And I thought actually I have a lot of opinions about it. So I'm really responding to that video, but I want to focus on this Warhammer section because he said something that I think is clearly wrong. Right now, this is another video of me saying, "Hey, I think Professor Dungeon Master is wrong," but I want to be super clear. I only take the time to say Professor Dungeon Master is wrong because it doesn't happen that often. And the reality is he's doing a fantastic job with his channel, and it's an extraordinary event when he gets something wrong because there's a value to it, because when he gets something wrong, it's because of this massive complexity issue, right? I'm convinced that right now Dungeons and Dragons is the most complicated thing on earth. And the reason why is, okay, you have the art world, right? And okay, let's throw some crayons on a canvas and sell it for $3 million. That's its own body of knowledge, its own discipline, okay? And then you have the math world, right? It could be science, could be finance, whatever. But it's hard numbers, right? And that's its own world, right? And so you have science, and I'm going to include all the math, techie stuff in there. I actually really better. I think it's, you know what? Science is almost valueless at this point, and the reason why is we've entered a world where we really truly have entered a world that lacks shared facts, and so science is incredibly valuable if they had people who could communicate what they actually figure out in a way that didn't terrify people or make them instantly distrust the science community. But we're no longer in that world. The scientists have continued to do good science to find information and then just completely cock it up when they try to go and tell the world. So if you're gathering good science and you have good data, but you fail in every single way to communicate anything in a clear way that anyone trusts or in a way that's winsome, well, then your discipline is darn near useless. However, math is still useful, right? So you have math and art, okay? Two areas of the world. Dungeons and Dragons is where they meet. It's where they meet, okay? It is no one who plays Dungeons and Dragons. So I actually think that Dungeons and Dragons is a code, okay? So what is that? It's a set of rules or standards that a group or an individual can adhere to. And that's what Dungeons and Dragons truly is, in my humble opinion. It's one of the many things it is. The only thing it isn't is a game, in my humble opinion. But and actually, it's not everything. You need things to be defined. But one of the most valuable things about Dungeons and Dragons is I think it's a code. Okay, it is a set of rules, a standard that a group or an individual can adhere to, and that's truly what it is. And I think the people who get around Dungeons and Dragons realize that the code is combat, interaction, exploration. You combat your own deficiencies. You make every single interaction in your life as robust as you possibly can, and you explore yourself, you explore other humans, and you explore the world, right? Now, I'm an evangelical Christian, right? Now, I have faith, and that's gonna take, and that blesses me in this world, and it's my first and primary. It's my rock, it's my foundation, right? But I also absolutely use Dungeons and Dragons as a code, especially in the strawberry chocolate areas, right? Like areas where, I truly believe God really doesn't care if you like strawberry cake or chocolate cake, right? And so it leaves this area where we can choose, and the Bible literally says we have this liberty that we can use, and I use that liberty space for this code, right? And it's been incredibly valuable to me, right? not nearly as valuable as my faith. That gave me everything. It gave me eternal life, gave me a reason to live, gave me my wife, gave me my children. It's just far more valuable. But for the lost, Dungeons and Dragons is incredibly valuable, and for me, it is incredibly valuable. It's the second most valuable thing. It's definitely the most valuable secular thing in my humble opinion. All right, so, but he got something really wrong in my humble opinion. I want to talk about it. Okay, so he said. So first of all, he trotted out just like every. I'm not sure. I don't think Professor Dungeon Master is an OSR guy. I think he's actually a Dungeons and Dragons guy, right? And so I don't think he's really a member of the OSR community. Yeah, that's just my take, right? So, but he said something really fascinating. He said, he's talking about the down Q3 for Dungeons and Dragons, which I love hearing all these YouTubers squawk about. Oh my gosh, the world is failing. Look at Wizards of the Coast. They fell down. I'm like, dude, yeah, they were $60 million down on Q3. OSR and Indie didn't do 60 million in Q3, right? Like, did they? We don't even know, because the market cares so little about OSR and Indie that they don't even bother reporting on it. But Dungeons and Dragons as an off quarter, it's literally in the Wall Street Journal, right? It's incredible, right? So he gets in and he says, hey, one of the things that they have to pay for, and I'm like, they're paying for stuff. Yeah, that makes sense. What are they paying for, Professor Dungeon Master? He's like, when they paid Games Workshop the rights to make the rights to make the Magic the Gathering Warhammer 40K Commander decks. I'm just gonna say the MTG Warhammer 40K set, okay, which is Commander decks. All right, okay, and it really is about 400 cards, which is actually bigger than the set, so that's kind of interesting, right? So it's a set, right? So for brevity's sake, I'm just gonna refer to it as such. Okay, so basically, his idea is that I felt like he was putting forward that Wizards of the Coast went to Games Workshop and were like, hello, we'd like to make cards from your Warhammer 40K game. Would you let us do that? We'll write you a check. And I was like, what is he talking about? I don't think that happened. And the reality is, we don't know what happened, right? You will hear this constantly. You'll see it right down in the comments below. Fools running up on this channel. Oh, and actually, you can see it in this video. He's like, Strixhaven didn't do well. I don't have any numbers for you, but a bunch of people said they didn't like it, so that means it didn't sell. What? Like, all right, so first of all, let's get this straight. Nobody knows the numbers on the MTG D&D Canon hardback, okay? And the reason why is I'm connected to easily 500 people who do nothing but tweet about Dungeons and Dragons. And if there was anybody who could quote a single number on what a single book sold for, they would do it. But nobody can. In fact, the closest that has happened is Ben Grimm has squawked got a bunch of disgruntled TSR people to throw some paper in front of him, which they really didn't have the right to have. Like, he's literally telling tales out of school, right? And he's like, oh, I got this disgruntled stuff from the trash bins of a bunch of disgruntled TSR employees from 30 years ago. These are numbers and facts. Are they? Like, I don't know about that, buddy. Right? Like, and even he, like, when he talks on the podcast, he's like, oh, it's the best we have. Right? But the reality is, no one knows. No one knows the sales number on a single Perkinian Dungeons & Dragons book. Not one. Not one. Right? Not one. Nobody knows the numbers, right? So everybody's like, oh, that book didn't sell well. You don't know nothing, right? The reality is, I would love to know this number. I am extremely interested to know how Dungeons & Dragons books sold or didn't sell. But the hard, true fact is we do not know. We don't know how much Dungeons & Dragons makes per year, right? We know what Wizards of the Coast does, but nobody's been able to parse these numbers out, right? So the fact is, you don't know. No one knows how much these books are running for, right? So there's just conjecture. And here's the thing. I'm convinced Professor Dungeon Master don't know jack all of how the Magic the Gathering Warhammer 40K set came about, right? But I'm going to give you my opinion. He gave you his. Now I'm going to give you mine, right? Here's the thing. I don't think Wizards of the Coast first of all, I don't think Wizards of the Coast went to Games Workshop. I don't think Wizards of the Coast even thinks about Game Workshop, right? And the reality is, and I've heard people say, "Oh, Scott, Games Workshop makes more money than Dungeons and Dragons." Do they? You don't know how much money Dungeons and Dragons makes, right? You really don't, because it's all parsed into. It's actually agglomerated into Wizards of the Coast's main number, right? So you really don't know if it makes more or not, right? Even if it does, it doesn't matter, right? And here's why. Dungeons & Dragons is bigger than the company that owns it. It's far bigger than TS ever was. And frankly, it is flat out bigger than Hasbro, right? The reality is there is always going to be a market. There is always going to be somebody in line to buy Dungeons & Dragons. I don't know if that's true for Hasbro, right? They're a toy company, okay? Dungeons & Dragons is an element of Americana. Dungeons & Dragons is worth more than everything in Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro. That's just the reality of it, okay? And because the reality is, I think we're gonna, everybody will know what Dungeons & Dragons is 300 years from now. I'm not sure anybody will know what Hasbro is 300 years from now, right? And the other thing is, you're like, well, Games Workshop makes more money. They may, right? Here's the issue, right? Lockheed Martin, right? Big company, makes billions, makes far more money, right, than Dungeons & Dragons. But Lockheed Martin is not as important as Dungeons & Dragons. And the reason why is it's not on the front lines of American politics, culture, and religion. But Dungeons & Dragons is. It can literally move the dials on American politics, religion, and culture. And there are conversations that happen around Dungeons & Dragons that are absolutely amazing, right? And this, you're really seeing this. Elon Musk is a perfect example of this, right? That guy has billions, and he realized, you know what? If I don't do anything with him, if I'm not impacting American politics, culture, and religion, then I don't matter, right? And the reality is, Kanye right now. Kanye is on the tip of every American's tongue, right? He's not the richest American. He's not the most important. He's not. Actually, that's the point. He is kind of one of the most important Americans right now, because he is on the front lines of American politics, religion, and culture. He puts himself there, right? And he takes the slings and arrows to be there, right? And it costs him money, right? But he's made a career pissing people off and still remaining a billionaire, right? And so, so that's the issue, is I think, everything that's happening here is outrageously complicated, right? And we're piecing it together and we're trying to understand it, right? So I think Professor Dungeon Master is outrageously wrong. There was absolutely no point in time, right, where Wizards of the Coast was like, we need Games Workshop. Why? Why on earth would Dungeons & Dragons need Games Workshop? What show is name-checking Games Workshop, right? Is name-checking Warhammer 40K? Who cares about Warhammer 40K? It's just like Monty Python, just some old has-been crumpty-drumped, junk IP that is nothing compared to Dungeons & Dragons, right? It's got some fans. It's a cool world. Excuse me. But the reality is, compared to D&D, it's flotsam. It's just floating wood, right? It's just not, there is no point where Wizards of the Coast is we're going to put down our valuable, material, and we're on the edge of launching, perhaps the largest fantasy series in ever in human history, right? And and we're going to go over and deal with this crufty old, British IP about, dudes in tin can suits, right? I love Warhammer 40K, but the reality is, compared to D&D, it's nothing, right? And it wouldn't even exist without Dungeons & Dragons, right? They followed Dungeons & Dragons in every possible way, right? So the reality is, there was never a point, in my humble opinion, where Wizards of the Coast went to Games Workshop and said, please give us your IP, right? They don't need it, right? I think what happens is, at some convention somewhere, a Games Workshop dude got into a room a Games Workshop lady got in the same room with a Wizards of the Coast lady, and they're like, "Hey, you guys put that Walking Dead thing. That was wild. It upset people, but I think you sold the heck out of it, didn't you?" And they were like, "Yeah, we did. We absolutely sold the heck out of it, right?" And then they're like, we could do Warhammer 40K, and we could do in Magic the Gathering, right? And the reality is, once they started talking, I don't think Wizards of the Coast ever cut a check. They're like, "Hey, here's what we'll do. We'll run these sets, man, and we'll just we'll make maybe 10,000, right, or whatever. We'll blow them out, right, and you guys get 20% and we get 80. Done, right?" I don't think there was ever a check written by Wizards. I don't think Wizards of the Coast never gave one single thought to Warhammer, because Wizards of the Coast doesn't need Warhammer, right? Warhammer is like virtually irrelevant compared to Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons is literally looking at a massive, multi-billion-dollar franchise launching next year. They have a line of people who want to make every physical product under the sun connected to their material, and the reality is, and they are successfully transitioning from a dying grognard fan base to super young, super engaged critters, right? Like, Wizards of the Coast needs Warhammer like they need a third hole in their head, right? So the idea that Wizards of the Coast walked over and wrote Games Workshop a check is ludicrous, absolutely ludicrous. I think both groups were like, I think basically Magic the Gathering can make any sets they want, but they want to make sets that people are excited about, and this is very exciting. So I'll end this video with this, right? I actually just purchased 77 select distinct commons and uncommons and rares, all that cost less than $1. So I got 77 of the all creatures of all factions, and I just cherry picked the best stuff I could, and I'm getting 77 of these of the Dungeons & Dragons. I'm getting 77 of these Magic the Gathering Warhammer 40K cards that are being printed, and I'm going, and so they're all creatures. They're all from the Astartes area. They're all from the Tyranid area. I got the Necrons, and I got the Chaos guys, right? And I got the best creatures from among them. And the vast majority of them were under $1. I think maybe 5 of them were like $1 to $2. And essentially, I put a $2 cap on any one card, and I got 77 cards for $41 shipped from TCG Player, right? And of course, all 77 of those are going to go right into a Dungeons & Dragons story deck the way they should, right? Because I'm doing tangible campaign construction. But I did want to just take a minute to clarify, there's no way Wizards of the Coast ever went to Games Workshop. It went down the way I just said. That's my humble opinion. What's yours? Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.